Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. Her name is Roberta Glass, Glass. She runs True Crime Report on YouTube. And the reason for our discussion tonight is something that happened in New York yesterday, Wednesday, March 6, 2019, at the Thurgood Marshall U.S. Courthouse in New York, New York. There was a hearing and it was supposed to be open argument between two people, really. It was Michael Cernovich versus Virginia Jeffrey, who used to be Virginia Roberts, and Alan M. Dershowitz versus Virginia L. Jeffrey, and they are litigants in a civil suit. And we were very fortunate to have Roberta Glass on hand and in the courtroom, much like she did her reporting, or is continuing her reporting on the whole NXIVM matter. This Jeffrey Epstein situation has now boiled to the surface after Miami Herald published a 3-part article, and the case against Jeffrey Epstein, the criminal case, was set aside by a judge, and they're supposed to make a determination very shortly about how to wrap up or reconsider the criminal case. But this is a civil matter, and anyway, I would like to just commend Roberta Glass for being on hand. Are you there?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So you, on pretty short notice, you made your way over there last night and saw some pretty interesting firsthand stuff. So maybe you can just do a little bit of a background how you've been in these courtrooms. I don't know if this is the same court that NXIVM was.
No.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, this was the Thurgood Marshall Court, which is 50,000 times as intimidating as the Brooklyn Federal Court, which is like become my home away from home.
Okay.
There so often. I know how to get through security. All the people who work there are super nice. This is much more like it's just a huge building with tons of steps and columns, and the security was much more intense. It was a freezing night yesterday, and I had like my thigh-high leg warmers on under my pants and all this stuff on. So getting through security was like and then also they have these elevators where you go up and then you're a hallway, and then all the doors, it looks like you're in a room full of mirrors, all these gold doors. Is this what and then I didn't know, thank God there was a janitor there. I asked, like, which door do I go in? I wouldn't know. Then you go in through one door into another door. It's really,
wow, amazing.
really, really.
It was on the 17th floor, right? 17th floor?
17th floor, yeah.
And so you found it to be relatively busy too, right?
Yeah, I was honest. The trains were messed up. So I got there. By the time I got through security, there were no more seats in the courtroom. I was in the overflow room, I was the first person in the overflow room, and then the overflow room filled up.
Wow. How many people total? How many people total do you think were there?
TV, where you can see, in some ways, you're at a disadvantage because you don't get the whole sort of vibe of the audience watching it that's not in the overflow room, but you get an advantage because I got to see Alan Dershowitz like straight on reaction and the judge's reaction really close up. And you're at a disadvantage when you're sitting, in the courtroom far away. It's a very tiny, tiny courtroom compared to a Brooklyn courtroom that I'm used to.
Gotcha. And it was mostly media there that were there as well, correct?
I don't know who was, I don't know who was there. Honestly, I don't know who everybody was. Okay. There was obviously media because I stayed for Alan Dershowitz's impromptu press conference afterwards, which was really funny. And media showed up, you have to check your cell phone. They showed up, they sort of huddled all around him in the hallway afterwards. And there was a good deal of media, about like maybe 15, 20 people.
Interesting. Inside the court building.
The courtroom. Oh, it seemed like a lot of people. It seemed like maybe I don't know. I don't want to guess. Maybe 100 people, 150 people, something like that, I would think.
And what was the kind of layout? You got started, there was some type of people making their case for the unsealing of records, right? So
Right.
Giuffre had her own attorney there. I believe his name is Paul Cassell. And
Yes.
so he represented her in both of those discussions. So Cernovich had a guy by the name of Randazza who has been around, who's now, I think, representing Alex Jones in First Amendment.
He's a First Amendment lawyer,
Right.
yeah.
And so he was there. Who went first? Was it Cernovich's lawyer or was it Dershowitz?
Dershowitz, the first time I started taking notes was on Dershowitz's lawyer saying that Dershowitz's whole reputation has been ruined by this, that we can protect the victims by redacting things, but they only talked about redacting the names of minors. Now, so I have a question for you because you're a lawyer. So if this happened and the person was a minor at the time but is no longer a minor, does that mean that their name gets redacted?
That's a damn good question. I would think that the matter at hand is the status of that person at the time of lawsuit. But I think both Cernovich and Dershowitz are arguing that those should be unredacted. That's really their point, is they want access to these information. Their argument is that it's in the public interest to uncover these names. And Castle seems to have made that argument. There was that interesting interview with him outside the courtroom that you sent me, where he said, well, we can just sit down and go piece by piece and see what's important. So I think that that was interesting. So I do believe that the judges will rule that it's at the time of the lawsuit that those names, it's not, it's very common to have Jane Does, John Does, etc. In the interest of public safety and in the interest of privacy. So.
No, let's be clear. Like, the purpose of Dershowitz, if you listen to his interviews and you really listen with open ears, is he wants to find out anyone who's accusing him and terrorize them with the law and sue them to death. That is, he says in one interview, I don't care if I spend the rest of my money. He just mentioned Virginia Giuffre. Tell me how to say her name again.
Giuffre, I think it's Giuffre. That's what I think. So it's hard.
Giuffre.
Giuffre.
Virginia Roberts for this purpose of this interview.
Yes. Yes.
Anyways, the point, he says, I just want her. And that's how Alan Dershowitz, interestingly, refers to her by the name that he strangely knew her under, Virginia Roberts, allegedly.
Right.
He referred to her under that with that name in his press conference.
Right. And
so,
it's important to know that he was part of the Epstein Dream Team, along with Kenneth Starr and a couple, I think Black was his name, a well-known Florida defense attorney. So he was around Epstein in the era of 2001 to 2010. I believe the original agreement was agreed upon, or the criminal case was adjudicated and finalized sometime 2008, 2009. So, it's the accusation, just to be clear, is that at least Virginia Roberts wrote or had, I think in the deposition, and this is on the Miami Herald, she's being interviewed, that he had sex with her 6 times. So she said 6. And there's another accuser with the last name of Ransom who accused Dershowitz also of engaging in sexual intercourse with her. So there's 2 accusers. And, so this hearing was, very important as to whether these 2 people, Cernovich and Dershowitz, will be able to obtain court records about possibly other accusers.
Right. And Dershowitz's position is different than the others who want these records unsealed, in that he wants 3 very specific records unsealed that he feels will exonerate him. Okay?
Did they itemize those in court?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of those is a email concerning the manuscript of Virginia Roberts. She wrote a memoir, right? Okay. And her editor, I believe, wrote her back. There was only one page on Alan Dershowitz, and it didn't mention sex. And she says, think about putting more Alan Dershowitz in your manuscript. And so Alan Dershowitz thinks that's incredibly exonerating, and that what this email can be interpreted as meaning is that the editor is saying to Virginia Roberts, go and make up all the details you want, because everybody knows you can't have enough Dershowitz in a memoir. Forget making up stuff about Harrison Ford or Tom Cruise. What the public really wants is Alan Dershowitz, sex with Alan Dershowitz, details about that, right?
Oh, God.
So, and I talked to my friend Kathy Medwick, who's a writer and has a lot of editorial experience and is, I think, one of the best human beings ever, but about that this morning. And I said, would an editor ever ask their writer to make up details? And she said that would be considered so immoral and out of what's typically asked.
Absolutely. Well, they could get sued. The complications of lying in any type of memoir is that somebody could litigate and actually win if it's not true.
And what she said is that, this is what I interpreted that email to mean, is, that's really interesting that Alan Dershowitz, who negotiated this deal for Epstein, was also a client of his underage brothel services. Put more of that in there. And that's very common for an editor. And the fact that Alan Dershowitz wants to twist the meaning of that email should alarm the public.
Yeah, interesting. And her manuscript has never been publicly published, to my knowledge.
Right. So one of those is the page of the manuscript, where and one of them is the email. And I think one other thing that he thinks is exonerating, I think maybe some kind of, I have it in my notes somewhere. God knows I took so many, but it's, three things. And his lawyers arguing that my client is 81 years old and he may not live to the unsealing of these documents, like Damien Echols style.
Oh my gosh.
He won't live. You got to release them right away.
What was the name of his attorney? I forgot. I thought I read that.
Oh, his attorney. He had two there. Oh gosh, I'm not sure I got that. He's interviewed in that interview.
Right, he's behind, outside when. And Dershowitz, when you put the Goodman was out there. This guy Jason Goodman of Crowdsourcing the Truth interviewing Dershowitz, and he really wanted to make his statements heard. He was out there for a good 15 minutes. 15-minute monologue / diatribe, really, force. And he was Dershowitz is on TV today. I think it was it Good Morning America? Which show was that he was on, where he was being directly asked whether he was involved with any improprieties, and he categorically denied it.
Oh yeah, and this is the really interesting thing about Alan Dershowitz, is that he has had such a career, and he's so comfortable in a courtroom that he feels that he will win on any case, that he is dying to get this into the court in his. It's like a baseball player, like Michael Jordan wanting to play one-on-one basketball because he knows he'll win. It doesn't matter what the truth is. He just feels like the courtroom is his domain. Get this in the courtroom, and he feels that the public is buying this. And if you look at the comments, I have never seen such a comment section on a video. People who might buy a bridge, don't believe him. Right. It just every comment is, I don't believe this guy. He has this. Alan Dershowitz has this habit of his left eye twitches when he talks about this subject.
Interesting.
I mean, clearly, he probably doesn't play poker.
Right, a bunch of tells.
yeah, major tells. He just comes off as a liar, and he thinks he's convincing everyone.
Well, he's really claiming he wants her deposed. He wants all this he wants criminal prosecution of Roberts. You know, he has a lot of demands of the court system to obtain justice outside of the court. You know, not while he's in court, but at least he's saying that for interviews.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's so many things. This was really interesting hearing, and you realize the impact of the Me Too movement, of not just the Me Too movement with women, of the Leaving Neverland documentary, the Cosby trial, where the jury was educated about how victims really act, why they this also came up in the last NXIVM hearing, why the prosecution is going to have an expert on how victims of sexual abuse act, and it's not a way that you would think that they would act. They often stay in contact with their victims, victimizers. They often delay reporting, and the public's just being educated on all these fronts. So watching Alan Dershowitz bring up the Me Too movement, which I think he confuses with his own personal movement, the Me First movement or the Sue You movement. But it's like watching someone in Times Square in like a white polyester leisure suit asking you why there's no discotheques open. I mean, he's so in a different era, you know, and so out of it that the time for this kind of defense is over. You know, blame the victim, go after the victim. He thinks it's going to exonerate him, make him look great, and the public will love him and treat him like the victim he is and the innocent man. Like he even said in one interview, everyone can see that I'm innocent. And I felt like, you know, screaming, no one thinks you're innocent. No one believes you. Not one person believes you.
Wow. Yeah, now that he has two accusers, that's going to be a problem with him. But there was an article that I read that he is still Epstein's attorney, and Epstein is still calling him as of the last year, you know? So how I wish somebody would have asked him that question today is, are you still representing Jeffrey Epstein?
That's a great question. You know, also the other I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Do
you know that Epstein has told a journalist that he received a therapeutic massage from an old Russian at Jeffrey Epstein's house? So he's admitted to being inside of Epstein's house and receiving a massage.
Is that the massage that he didn't enjoy and called his wife right after?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So
that's such a weird. That's kind of like one of those defenses. Like no one who could ever be doing anything bad would call their wife after.
Right. I mean, that's what he's trying to convince. Oh yeah, right. Good, excellent point. Very excellent.
And I have to also give my mom credit, because my mom has been telling anyone and everyone who could listen since 1982. I'm not kidding. Her disgust and distaste with Alan Dershowitz. It would be like, Mom, what's for dinner? I do not like that Alan Dershowitz. I just asked you what's for dinner. She has been so obsessed with disliking him, with, you know, way before this ever came out, that I have to give her due, you know. Moms know.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because it's not like Dershowitz has had a stellar record of clients. I mean, he's had O.J. Simpson. He's had... What's the guy's name? Klaus von Bülow.
Klaus von Bülow.
I mean, so...
And when he's had a love letter movie, and in that movie, there's a scene where he talks about building a defense and how he has to completely obliterate the case and how he's going to do it. And there's a line in there he goes, because the judges are going to have to go home to their wives and explain why they let that wife killer Klaus von Bülow go free. Like, it's the nagging wives that are really getting in the way of justice.
Right. Yeah.
Very interesting. I mean, he's no friend to women, and for him to bring up that this is bad for the Me Too movement and rape victims, like he's been some champion when he negotiated the deal for Epstein, like he's some champion of women, had me shaking when I left the
outrageous. Because the level of abuse is really off the charts. They've had these women go public, but there's been settlements. We know that there have been civil settlements that involve Boies Flexner with Jeffrey Epstein from his estate. And I think that even Dershowitz has mentioned them in discussions that they were sizable settlements. And we don't know how many settlements there are, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Those are settlements that are clearly non-disclosed. I also just need to correct myself because I thought that video that I watched was an interview with Dershowitz this morning. I was wrong. It's actually 3 years old, but it was on the Today Show where he categorically denied. So I made a mistake there.
It's a good interview, though. Are you talking about the one with the woman interviewer?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's a good interview. It's a good one to watch. And also, I was thinking of why can't I think of his name, who is being the director who's being accused of abusing all those underage boys who did those big films. Singer. Remember when he was first accused and he said that his schedule exonerated him?
Good point. Excellent point. His schedule was going to exonerate, right?
That's what Dershowitz is. He wants to see the flight records, and it makes it very clear to me because of Singer experience, where that's how he got out of it the first time. It's since come up again. How he got shut up the victims the first time is by saying I wasn't there and hiring, Marty Singer as his lawyer. Alan Dershowitz is saying the same thing. Let me see these flight records. He's really looking to get his own witnesses to be his alibi witnesses, maybe his wife, maybe his daughter, he suggested. Right. And there was one moment also that was really interesting in the courtroom where older male, there's 3 judges, 1 woman, two men, but the older male judge had trouble, just like I am, pronouncing Virginia Roberts' new last name. And he said, well, let me see if I can get this quote exactly. He said something like, I'll call the witness what I like.
Interesting.
I'll call the defendant's parties what I like. And the women, you could hear a gasp. I looked behind me because I was in the front row. I looked behind me and all the women were, in the room making eye contact with me, smiling, shaking our heads, because it just seemed to represent so much of the attitude towards women and women victims. Like, it just doesn't matter what their names are. Doesn't matter what I call them.
Wow.
They're
Well, I mean, that probably goes back to the Holocaust decision, that they were swept under the rug. They were never afforded their rights under the Victim Rights Act. And that was it. Epstein got a slap on the wrist, 13 months, and most of it served at his home. Never really did any hard time.
Well, you look at someone like R. Kelly or Bill Cosby, and 50 women have to come forward.
Right, good point.
Yeah. R. Kelly, I mean, it just seems like it has to be crazy numbers
before people start talking in serious. Well, according to what I'm reading, there's hundreds of victims. There's at least 100 of these Jeffrey Epstein people around. They're not all have come forward. A lot of the stuff's under the table. And by the way, Singer is also kind of within the orbit of Jeffrey Epstein. He was.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he was supposedly, according to some reporters, Crazy Days and Nights, that he went to Lolita Island, that's where he would go there. And he would actually, instead of flying in, take a boat so that he could do it surreptitiously.
Have you heard anything about Alan Dershowitz's first wife, Susan Barish?
No, but I vaguely recollect that there was something scandalous between both of them. Do you know anything about it?
Well, I mean, I've just, no credible sources, which is really, kind of credible sources, but she the stuff I've read is that she eventually jumped off a bridge and committed suicide, which is a rare way of a woman to die. And
Very
right
rare.
before that, Alan Dershowitz had cheated on her. She had thrown some of his legal papers to the wind, and that he had beat her up, and that he had gotten his 2 kids from her. One the custody.
Custody, right.
But they were basically insinuating that he killed her, and kind of hushed it up. But I think that also, if any of that is true, that also what is an option in that scenario is that he litigated her to death, to suicide.
Drove her to suicide.
Yeah. I really see that as a possibility. If any of that is true, I don't know.
Well, what do you think that if that's the past, there'd be precedent for the future? If these girls who want to be anonymous are redacted, they're up against a seasoned, long-term attorney with resources. It's the potential is there, and I think did they use the term slut shaming? Sorry for the term,
yes.
But did they use that in court?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, they did many times. They brought up Cernovich and Paul Cassell, pulling no punches, called him a slut shamer. He also called him a proxy for Mr. Dershowitz. We would describe him as a slut shamer or as the cat's paw for Alan Dershowitz.
Wow. And apparently, they're supposedly publicly, Cernovich and Dershowitz are fighting, but Paul Cassell, in a Pro Hoc Vis filing that was filed in 2017, it was a response in opposition to, they wanted to unseal, this has been going on for 2 years, but right. Cassell was involved, and he actually includes a lot of information about Dershowitz, but there's pictures of Cernovich with Dershowitz together. There's statements by Cernovich that he got into law because of Dershowitz, that Cernovich's public statements about women would, make a lot of women literally throw up. But it's very interesting because Cernovich is real, and Dershowitz are up against very smart people, and he wrote this his motion to unseal this. Cernovich's motion was pretty much destroyed in this counter motion where they say that Cernovich was using opposite case sightings that didn't actually bolster his case. So he sent this bungling motion into the court that most of his followers probably are people who admire him would never read, but it is really if you really unpack all the players and everything, this whole situation is really incredible. It came to a point yesterday.
Yeah, the woman judge, I just say that just to, because I didn't catch their names. She asked, what are his qualifications to call himself a journalist? And his First Amendment lawyer, who is very much like I was saying to you before we started recording, in the mold of Mark Agnifilo, who is the lawyer for Keith Raniere, like very theatrical and makes big emotional arguments. And she was saying, well, how is he a credible journalist? Could you call him a journalist? And he's saying, yes, I would call him a journalist. He's done 2 films. I'm like, do you know what these films are? Yeah,
he's done one, I think it's Doxed. He's made a couple self-financed films, yes, Cernovich has. And
they were saying that he made a very smart argument, which he's saying, well, the New York Times would have to pass that test, and if we put Judith Miller on the stand, Judith Miller as an example, she got us into the Iraq War on false information. Very quick argument and very smart.
The name of Cernovich's film is Hoaxed. It's a documentary.
But he also said about women, it's very interesting that none of these men who are around Dershowitz like women very much, from Epstein to Dershowitz to Cernovich, who said that any good sex is like rape. Right. Something close to that.
Right. No, definitely. It was, let me get the direct quote. I still have it here. go down. He's written a lot of stuff like that, but the hotter the sex, the more closely it resembles rape. October 15th, 2011. And
there's no such thing as date rape too.
Right. Have you guys ever tried raping a girl without using force? Try it. It's basically impossible. Date rape does not exist.
What he's never had sex without force?
I don't know, but I think that he had had a rape case against him, Cernovich. I think that I don't know what the conclusion of it was, but there was a section. I believe that there was something like that. I'm not totally sure, but there was something like that in his past. Have you heard that?
I just became familiar with him when you asked me to attend this hearing.
Gotcha. So I will have to double check that. Let's see. I think that there was a case like that.
And there's also another interesting moment because Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer was there.
Ghislaine, yes.
Ghislaine.
S is silent.
S is silent. Ghislaine Maxwell. His name was Mr. G. Was his name.
Right. Well, do you know who that was? They brought him in from Colorado. That was the guy who got Kobe Bryant off on his sexual assault case.
Yeah, and he did not seem so prepared because they each have like 4 minutes. So, you don't have as much time as someone, watching it. It's really like, I don't know what I'm thinking of, like one of those like speed dating or something, you're writing down, everything's happening very fast. And he didn't seem as prepared as he could have. They asked him if there was any reason on sensory judgment why these 107 documents shouldn't be unsealed, and he says, "I'll have to go back and look." And then he announced, "I'm out of time. Like, don't ask me any more questions. I'm out of time.
I've earned my money. I'm out of time. I'm done." Right. So on the Wikipedia page for Mike Cernovich, just for clarification, Cernovich was charged with and arrested for rape in 2003, but he denied the allegations. The charge related to this incident was later reduced to misdemeanor battery of a woman for which he performed community service. So he was arrested for rape, but I guess he was convicted on a misdemeanor.
So, and then there was a great moment right after that where the older judge asked him if there's any of these 167 documents that should be unsealed, and he said no. And the judge said, "You can't possibly be serious."
To who? Randazza?
No, to Mr. G.
Mr. G. Oh, interesting. So I wonder why he was there for Maxwell. I don't know if she was named party. I guess not. I think it's because the original suit was a
Miami suit.
Yes, right. I think that Robert sued Maxwell for defamation, right? That's the original suit. Was a defamation suit?
I thought it was that the Miami Herald and all these newspapers have also joined suit asking for these documents to be unsealed.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, it's really super Byzantine what's going on. There's a lot of movable people and parts.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on this subject, and it's quite different than going to the NXIVM hearings that are quite uplifting, and you feel like justice is being done. These are like the injustice hearings. There's like a great, 2 women prosecutors, the cult leaders in jail looking terrible. All the rulings are going against them. You don't know how that NXIVM is ever going to win, even with all their money, and you feel like justice is going to be done. And this is quite the opposite,
Wow, yeah, that's remarkable. And so how long in total do you think the entire hearing was?
It was long. I mean, it was long for how many, I'd say I got out of there like an hour and maybe an hour and 10 minutes, which is long for a hearing that was supposed to be 14 minutes total.
Right. So and when you kind of left, there was, something going on. Goodman was down there and he interviewed, or he had a time with this guy, John Connolly, who co-wrote a book on Epstein published in November 28, 2017. Filthy Rich, the Billionaire Sex Scandal, the shocking true story of Jeffrey Epstein. But did you see other members of the media out there trying to get interviews? It seems like Goodman kind of got a scoop having Dershowitz there for 15 minutes.
Well, Dershowitz actually came and stood right next to me and said, I'm going to have my press conference right here, right here. He had all these sycophant law students that just ran up to him after that's what they look like to me, young law students. I didn't get to ask, are you young law students? But that's what they look like. I can't imagine what maybe their staff, I don't know. And one, what looks like to be, maybe his PR agent or something like that. It may have been his wife. God, I don't know what she looks like. But he's like, I'm going to have it right here. And they're like, Mr. Dershowitz, we can't use our cameras in this room. And he's like, oh, well, I'll have it out in the hallway then. Like, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to have my picture taken.
Right. When tell my side of the story, right?
Right. And he gave a speech. And I had a reaction to it that I've sat through, a lot of this stuff, a lot of hearings with a lot of ridiculous claims being made. But he made a speech suggesting that the federal government make a criminal investigation into Virginia Roberts and her lawyers, how absolutely innocent, and now everyone can see how innocent he is, and all the journalists are right. And as I'm writing and listening to this, I just start laughing, but trying to control it, and coughing. And when he said that the thing about the federal criminal investigation, I thought that I was going to collapse into laughter, and I had to just pack. I've had enough. I mean, it really takes two people. Like, you have to sell a lie, and I just wasn't buying
it at all. Well, he actually called Castle a liar. I think in that court, according to the reports today, he said Judge Castle is a liar. He lied to the court today, which is a very bold statement. He abused his position as an officer of the court. So,
oh yeah, and he says one of us is committing perjury. I say it never happened. She says she had sex with me. One of us is lying, and one of us deserves to be in prison for perjury. And I was like, yeah, that's you, Alan Dershowitz. You deserve to be in prison for perjury. I just have never seen someone so out of touch, really. Wow. Out of touch, full of himself, way past his, had too many yes people around them since maybe Hillary Clinton. I don't know.
Wow. That's pretty rough when you're comparing Dershowitz to Clinton.
It's a different vibe, it's a
right.
different
But it's the studious kind of deflection, intelligent, prevarication, blaming the other people, I mean, if he can really prove that he wasn't there, he should have just proffer that proof to the public right away, right?
And he doesn't want to be deposed. He's been avoiding being deposed.
Right, and that's what somebody asked him that, right? Like, aren't you ready to be deposed? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll be deposed, but then he won't be deposed.
He claims that he responded and he wanted to be deposed. No, he's spinning his own, his own fairy tale narrative of this is my opinion, obviously, of what he wished had happened, that he was never involved and never had these, never had gotten involved with this sex thing because it ruins his public image. And you know what I was thinking about is about like Jason Flom and all these people who have like these innocence organizations and talk about how bad the justice system is.
Jason Baldwin?
No, it's Jason Flom. He runs the Church of Rock and Roll.
Oh, okay.
He does this innocence pod. Like, he used to run a record company.
Oh, yeah. No, but he's been with Baldwin and Eccles, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, like, he has never heard a cry of innocence that he has not believed. That guy is the most gullible human, one of the most gullible humans alive. But you never see those people, A, in a courtroom, and B, talk about the real injustice of our system, which is that people who have money and who have knowledge and who have educations can game the system like this.
And connections, absolutely.
And connections.
Yeah.
That's the real injustice. It's not wearing black T-shirts and listening to heavy metal.
So true. That's a really important statement. And that's exactly what happened in this Epstein case, and you're still seeing it play out. I mean, I think it's fascinating, too, that this the U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mayer vacated the court, and I think that they're supposed to respond in 15 days, which is coming to an end, I think, today or tomorrow. So the whole yeah. So I think what they're expecting is finding out the remedy for not addressing these girls under the Victim Rights Act, U.S. Crime Victim Rights Act. So that's the criminal case. But you're right. I mean, that's it's really a shame.
Yes, and also, of course, the injustice happens. It just really feels unjust. And I had a hard time sleeping last night, and it was very upsetting. It was a very upsetting display. Of power and injustice, I guess.
I think that's a great way to end it. I really appreciate you going to that hearing and giving a first-person account. I think it's actually a very important moment in this whole Epstein case, and you were there just rubbing shoulders with so many important people that are out there in the legal career, legal field, journalistic field. That it's pretty remarkable that you were able to make it there.
Oh, thanks for telling me about it.
All right, cool. I guess we're done. Anything else? Where can people listen to your stuff?
I'm on iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube. I think that covers it. Roberta Glass, True Crime Report. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook. Hit me up. I'd love to talk about any of this stuff with anyone who's interested. So
right on, cool. All right, Roberta Glass, True Crime Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, cool. All right, we're done.